Welcome to Women in Power Active, an initiative started by UR Sportswear to empower women to find their own active adventure. I'm your host, Jacalyn Gross. Today we are interviewing Brenna Anderst, pronouns she, her. She is a runner, a climber, hiker, and just a general lover of outdoors. She is also an animal lover and works on a farm. She gets a little bit into that, which is really interesting. And also her goals going into the next year or overall goals, not even just year-based. She has really cool way that she thinks about being active as a privilege. And I can really appreciate it as somebody who really has a lot of baggage, of emotional baggage when it comes to running or being active, to look at how you can really just appreciate and take a step back and say, okay, I get to do this. I don't have to do this. And it doesn't have to be a certain way, especially when you're kind of in the outdoors and your plan doesn't always work out the way that you think it does. She is just a calm and passionate person. She's also an amazing artist who draws inspiration from the mountains and from animals. And I really think you're going to enjoy this episode. We can all use just a little bit more appreciation for our active lifestyle. It's kind of ideal that you're in your parents' house, because I was going to start with, like, how did you become active? And was there somebody who inspired you? Are your parents active, or is there somebody else that you grew up around being active?
Yeah, so I would say that I grew up in a family of pretty active people, or at least like outdoor enthusiasts. So I think that's where a lot of my hobbies and interests come from. My grandmother, actually, she grew up in Ireland, and when she was in her 20s, she had seen pictures of Washington State and basically was like, I want to go there because she saw pictures of mountains and she was very inspired by what she saw. So she ended up moving out here and, of course, got married, started her own family. But she was really inspired, of course, by the mountains of Washington and wanted to figure out how to get into those. And so she joined the Mountaineers. And at the time, she was one of very few women, of course, in the Mountaineers program. But she did it with her husband, who was my grandfather, who I've actually never met. He passed away before I was born. Um, but then they also got all of their kids into it. So my dad was always very interested in getting outside. That's something he really instilled in myself and my siblings as well. I wouldn't say that we took like a super active approach to being outside when I was younger. It was more about, road trips and camping and appreciating our surroundings and nature. And wasn't necessarily like, you got to climb the tallest peak or you got to go on a super long run. We basically, just did your basic like hikes and camping and backpacking as a family. And it was definitely more geared towards getting the kids outside versus like achieving big things, which I think helped me have an interest later because I didn't have like a sour taste in my mouth from a kid being like, oh, I hiked so far. And so, getting into my 20s, I really wanted to get outside more. And then that just naturally inspired being active in the outdoors too.
Yeah. Did you end up playing any organized sports growing up?
I didn't. I did swimming,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I a little bit of competitive sports, but never like I wouldn't say like organized competitive sports. It was more swimming. I did some dance lessons, things like that, and then I grew up in an area that is very close to the outdoors. I grew up on 5 acres, so just spent a lot of time outside there doing, active kid things that are just active by nature, like riding my bike to see my friends and things like that.
You've always been somebody who's just or you seem like to me, at least in my perspective, is that like you've just always you have like activity like as part of your life, like just woven into it. Like how did that happen, I guess? Is that just something that you need now? Do you think about it at all?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say need is definitely a key word there. So, again, I didn't grow up necessarily like penciling in activity as like part of my daily schedule. So it is like something that I've like taught myself over time. I would say starting in my 20s, there was a time where I was in the Peace Corps. And so I lived in Morocco. And, of course, the culture is completely different. I'm in a completely new community. I don't know anybody. So I needed to create like a schedule for myself to kind of have a little bit of control since so many other things in my life at that time were not in my control. It's kind of when you're the Peace Corps, you're definitely like going with the flow. You're learning from a whole new community. And so I basically I created this activity schedule for myself to kind of just create a little bit of that control that I could have like just for me. And so, I had a bunch of just like workouts that I had downloaded onto my computer. Most of them were Jillian Michaels. So I'd like do Jillian Michaels little workout routines in my house that I had. And, I didn't have access to weights and stuff. So I like filled up water bottles with like sand or water and like, definitely had to make do and get a little bit creative. And then I also started running at that time too, and basically worked with a number of people, a number of women in my community to get others running with me. Just safety in numbers. I was in a place where it wouldn't necessarily be safe to just run by myself at any time of day. So I had a number of friends that I grew to know at that time, and they had also expressed interest in being more active, but wanted to feel safe doing it. So we would go on big like women's runs around town and stuff, and so that's kind of what got that side of things started in terms of just integrating activity into my lifestyle.
Wow, that's so cool. I did no idea about the Peace Corps and that experience. Wow. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I would say that experience definitely has shaped a number of things, active and non-active for sure.
Yeah, because it's like you had to kind of make your own way. You had to like make that happen for yourself being active. You had to be like aggressive, intentional about that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have
Yeah.
been able to do it. So, yes, it kind of makes you value that a lot more because you realize that it's like a gift, you should
Yep.
appreciate, not something that you have to do every day. So
Yeah.
amazing. And then how did you get into climbing?
Yeah. So, after the Peace Corps, I did some additional traveling and living abroad. So, between the Peace Corps and that, I kind of was like in and out for about 4 years and then ended up getting a full-time job in Everett. And, I was moving back to the area after being gone for some time. So I didn't really know anyone in the immediate area and really wanted to like find a community, find something new and active. And the Summit Everett Climbing Gym had just opened at that time. And so I'd seen like their advertisement, was like, oh, okay, I'll try that out. I had been there one time before when I was a kid, back when it was Cascade Crags. And so, I was like, that could be a fun way to maybe make new friends and maybe find an activity that I could enjoy. And, obviously, from there, I met a lot of my really close friends that I have now. I met my husband there. So you definitely say that I found that community that I was looking for, along with, a sport and an activity that I'm really passionate about and really enjoy too.
We all have stress or anxiety, but is being active, is that something that helps you, or is being on the farm, or like what is your
Both. Yeah, I'm being around animals and not always being like at the sanctuary because, I'm working, so sometimes there's obviously like stress involved with that. But like whenever I get like one-on-one time with the animals there,
Mhm.
that's like a huge stress reliever. But like activity too, climbing in particular, um, rock climbing, just because like when you're doing that, especially outside, you're so hyper focused on just like that singular moment.
Mhm.
Like you're not thinking about anything else. Like when I run and stuff, yes, it's a stress reliever, but I also can start thinking about like, that conversation I had earlier that day that maybe didn't go super well, or whatever I might be like overthinking. But when I'm climbing, like I'm only thinking about like where's the next hold or how can I move my body to reach that over there. So climbing has really, really helped with just like getting rid of that like overthinking and just living in the moment and focusing on what I'm doing at that specific time.
Yeah, and you do trad too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that too, it's like, you're so like involved with like the rock, like you're figuring out where to put your hands and your feet, but then you're also like looking at every single like nook and cranny in the wall to like figure out like where your gear can go. And yeah, like that's all you can think about. There's nothing, no outside
Yeah.
influences coming in. So yeah, that's honestly, I think that's why I um really started loving climbing. Obviously, I made friends through climbing too, so that was a big part of it because it's like I want to hang out with my friends. I'll we'll climb together.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really great community to start with. Um, but yeah, it's definitely a good stress reliever. We need a climbing gym on Lopez. It's yeah, I've been missing that.
Yeah, you guys should build one.
That's what we've been saying. We're like, okay, are we gonna like start a gym here?
Yeah,
Um, one of these days. It's on our list.
that'd be very cool.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, but how do you manage, like, do you get nervous when you're leading or stressed, and like how do you deal with that? Because I don't see that for you. Like I feel like you're just, calm and leading and
I try very hard to be.
yeah.
But no, I do get nervous.
Hmm.
Um, I don't like it's hard to think of like an exact like tip,
Yeah.
but I basically like I kind of tell myself like, okay, if I fall, like nothing's gonna happen. It'll be okay. I'll just like take a swing and the rope will catch me. And, it might be a longer fall than like if I'm on a top rope, but like I'm fine. It will catch me. So I think like being okay with falling has
Yeah.
helped me not fall, I guess. Or like help me get more confident in like
Yeah.
reaching for like a higher hold that maybe I won't get to. Um, but yeah, and I feel like every single season, because like this time of year, we're not out climbing all the time.
Right.
Um, so like starting in the spring where I start getting out more, I kind of have to like relearn that and like
Hmm.
get into the right headspace again. So like the first few times it's always super scary and I don't want to fall and but then I get that first fall over with and I'm like, "Oh yeah, like I'm not going to die if I fall." Obviously like it depends on the terrain too. So like, I'm not going out there telling everybody, yeah, just fall, it'll be fine. But um yeah, like being okay with falling, I think is the helpful part to it.
Yeah, like maybe like if you're getting really stressed, maybe take a fall to feel it and feel that
Hmm.
trust your gear and then
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I think you're totally right about like if you're worrying about falling, you're more likely to fall because your body positioning is probably not ideal, or you're grabbing onto the rock so hard you're tiring your
yeah,
hands out, like that's such a good point. It's like if you're worrying about this, you're gonna do it. So just, you know,
yep,
and it's hard, yeah, hard in the moment to think that way too, especially.
yeah. And it's so like counterintuitive, like
Mhm.
we're designed to like survive
Yes.
and like our survival instinct is like, no, I don't want to fall. Falling is bad.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's like you really do have to get to a place where you're okay, at least falling a little bit, again, like not saying like take humongous whippers that
Yeah.
like, you're gonna crash against the rock or something like that. But um yeah, kind of like know your limits too with like how far do you want to fall? Because that can help you with designing like when you want to place gear and stuff. So like I personally like the way I do it is when I'm climbing like a trad route, I'll always try and like place things like a body length. So I'll measure like, if there's a piece of gear at my feet, okay, now it's time to start looking for a place to put another piece of gear, if it's possible with the terrain.
Mhm.
So I always try and like measure myself because I know like, okay, like I'm 5'3", 5'4" ish. So if I am like above my piece and I fall up there, that's like a 10-foot swing potentially. And, maybe I don't really want to fall more than 10 feet because that might feel scary.
Mhm.
Um, so I kind of like measure things out that way with like what I know I'm comfortable with. Um, again, it doesn't always work out that way because the rock is not always consistent,
Yeah.
but I always try and do that.
Do you prefer trad for that reason? Because you have like a little more control about like where you're gonna place gear and things?
Yeah, I think what I really like about trad is, I really love doing more of like the alpine routes and like going like being like far removed or at least, perceivably far removed from like busy areas. So I like feeling like I'm more like involved with the environment. So like, I'm having to read the rock and know like where gear can go and having control over that. I don't know, I do really like sport climbing too, though. It's hard to like say that like I
Mhm.
definitively like one over the other because they do different things for me. Like I like um, when sport climbing, I'm generally with like a bigger group of people and we're all kind of trying out different routes that are all kind of close in proximity to each other. So it feels more like community based. But then if I'm trad climbing, we're often like we've hiked out 15 miles to go to
Mhm.
this peak that we really want to summit. And so that always feels like a big sense of accomplishment. So yeah, kind of depends.
Yeah.
They have pros and cons.
Since we're kind of talking about different activities that people might not do and necessarily, can you describe the difference between top rope, trad, and then alpine climbing?
Oh yeah. So top roping is what you specifically see in a gym generally. So the rope is already fixed. So you have your belayer who will help to belay you up the wall. And you can set that up in an outside setting too. Somebody can climb up a route and fix a rope, or potentially there might be a way to get to the top of a cliff by walking and set up a rope. And then sport climbing is when there's already prefix bolts in the wall. So if somebody is leading or doing that first set of a rope, they're using those to provide safety on their way up. So they'll clip into those with some quick draws. And then trad climbing is where there are no bolts already in the wall and you don't have the opportunity to set up a fixed rope for a top rope. So you're using gear that basically can constrict within a crack system in the rock, and that's providing your safety. So different gear that you might have for that would be like a nut, which is basically just like a piece of metal that you can wedge in to a crack and use as protection, or you might have something like a cam, which has like a camming like device or feature in it, so you can like constrict it and then release it within a crack, and it will basically like plug itself within the two walls of the crack and provide you with safety that way.
Mhm. And
Hopefully
then,
that was a good description.
yeah, no, that was
Google
amazing.
might do better than me. I don't know.
No, no, no. Yeah, no, no. You can tell you run groups and things. No, the other one was Alpine, because actually I don't think I know,
Hmm.
yeah, what that is.
Yeah, so if I were to describe like a crag
Mhm.
versus alpine climbing, so a crag is where you can drive up to a location and either there's a climbing wall right there by the parking lot, or you might have to walk in a little bit and there's like a few different like close in proximity walls that you can climb on. And normally all of those are single pitch, meaning, they're not more than one rope length long, and you're able to climb up and down, and there's generally like a few different climbs, again like in proximity to each other. Alpine climbing is a little less accessible than crag climbing, so you would generally park, there's a hike or maybe even a backpack into a mountain. So I would say that like alpine climbing, you're generally trying to reach a summit or you're in the backcountry on a wall that you have um, established knowledge of a route being there. And alpine climbing is generally more than one pitch of climbing. So that's something that we would call a multi-pitch. So there's transitions throughout the climb that allow you to take the rope longer than the established rope length all the way up to the top of wherever you're trying to get to.
Yeah. So like I've seen people kind of go into the enchantments before with like
Yep.
climbing. Is that kind of like Alpine? That would be Alpine
Yeah,
too.
yeah, I would say like going into the enchantments, there's a lot of stuff in the North Cascades. There's some stuff, in like Mount Rainier National Park.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's in Washington there's a ton of alpine climbing, and each one of them looks a little different. So like you could call Mount Olympus an alpine climb because there's a few different routes that you can take, but one of the routes does require a rope and a small rock section to reach the summit. So that I would consider an alpine climb. Um, but then, there's other much larger objectives like Mount Stewart is a well-known alpine climb. There's a scramble route on one side, but on the other side, there's a route that it's generally about estimated around 20 pitches.
Oh wow.
And so you have to take the rope up 20 pitches to reach the summit. So yeah, there's a wide variety of stuff that you might find in Washington. And what's also cool about alpine climbing is, if you're comfortable in like the 5'6", 5'7" um, range in terms of your climbing, and are comfortable, of course, with using trad gear. Honestly, most of the classic climbs in Washington are well within your skill set. So, I would say alpine climbing, you can do really hard stuff, but it's not necessarily about doing like the 512 mega hard
Mhm.
route. It's more about like the endurance and basically like the adventure getting out there in the first place with all of that gear and everything.
Mhm. And how long does that usually take? I mean, obviously a 20 pitch route would take a very long time.
It's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. But like on average, like what would your day look like if you're gonna go out alpine climbing?
Well, for that route in particular on Mount Stewart, that took us 2 full, like nonstop days.
Wow.
So we did sleep midway up the route. And when I say like the 2 full days, that also includes like the approach to the base of the climb and the deproach off of the summit. So yeah, it can take a long time, but then there's other alpine climbs that you could easily do in a day. Mount Ingalls is a great alpine climb, and the hike in isn't that far. You hike into to Lake Ingalls, which is a really popular hike.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it really just depends on what your objectives are, and also like how proficient you are with the transitions. When I first started, um, doing a transition between two pitches
Hmm.
took me a lot longer than it does now because you just get more comfortable with transitioning the gear and flipping the rope and all of that.
Did you know like where you're gonna sleep when you were doing Mount Olympus?
Oh, Mount Stewart.
Stewart, sorry.
Yes, yes. So there's a few different like websites you can and apps that you can look at. So I read a lot of information on Mountain Project,
Hmm.
and a lot of people on there had said like there's this notch area that has good spaces for sleeping, and so try your best to get there.
Hmm.
So that's basically what we were aiming for, is to get to this like notch section. And yeah, there was like some really good flat sections to lay out sleeping bags and gear and stuff.
What um what time of day was it when you got there? Or
Um, it it wasn't dark yet when we got there, so it was probably, and it was in the summer. So I would say that we probably got there at like 7, and
Mhm.
then we made dinner and like set up our sleeping area, which was like not prime or anything, because we were, we're carrying all of our gear while climbing, so we didn't bring like sleeping mats. We like laid out the rope to like sleep on that. So, because we, yeah, going as light as we possibly
Oh
can.
yeah, for sure.
So one climb that Zach and I have really wanted to do
Mhm.
is Mount Slessy. It's in Canada, but it's another big one. Um, and yeah, we've been looking at that one for quite some time. It's interesting because there was like, I don't know, a long time ago there was a plane crash there, and some of the pieces of the plane are still there. You still go by them on your approach and stuff, which is like, I don't know, eerie, but also
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we've looked at that mountain for quite some time. Um, a lot of the other climbs that we want to do in Washington aren't necessarily like longer multi-pitch ones, but more just like, kind of like big objectives. Like we really want to do Bonanza, which is, further east, but it's the tallest non-glaciated or like non-volcanic mountain in Washington.
Oh, cool.
One of those. Um, so yeah, I feel like the more we do, the more we're like, oh, okay, well now we heard about this other place. So we kind of just like figure it out as we go too. Because we hear about like another climb or something that sounds cool. And we're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll go there. Um, and we have a lot of friends that really like getting out. So oftentimes they might have a goal too, and we're like, oh yeah, we'll join you on that, um, which is fun.
Yeah, that's so cool. That sounds really cool. Now I just want to go climbing.
I know, yeah. So you want to go climbing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you recently have renovated the Three Fingers mountain outlook, and it's part
Hmm.
of, I believe it's part of Three Fingers Friend. It's like friends, it's like a group.
Yep. Yep.
Um, how did you get involved in that?
Yeah. So my husband, Zach, and I, a number of years ago, we were trying to find an activity that we could also do with our dogs, since so much of our free time we spent climbing, and you can't always take a dog, up a cliff with you, at least not safely. So we were trying to find something that we could all do together as like, our little family. And we decided to try and get to all of the standing fire lookouts in Washington State. So, we had already been to a couple, and we were like, oh, there can't be that many. And then we looked it up and realized there was, almost 100 of them. But we were
Wow.
like, well, we're committed, so we're doing this. So, we started mapping out where we wanted to go, all the ones that the dog could come along on. Our strategy for getting to all of them. And of course, one of those lookouts is Three Fingers, which is here in Snohomish County, and it can be seen from Everett. So of course, it's one of those mountains that like many people who live in the area often are looking at and dreaming about going to, or have gone to and have really special memories of being there. So that was one that was really exciting for us to visit. And when we did go up there and visit, we realized that one side of the lookout, the shutters had blown off. They get some pretty harsh winters up there, and it's a little cabin on top of a mountain, so it's delicate. And so we noticed that those shutters had blown off, and then we had been talking on our way down, like, oh man, like what a shame that could cause some damage this winter. And sure enough, a few weeks later, when the snow came in, someone posted on just some page online that they had flown by the lookout and one of the windows had blown completely open and the lookout was beginning to fill with snow. And so when that happened, there was a group of people that kind of got together and they're like, okay, well, we need to form a group or a committee to help to fix this problem and basically like adopt the lookout. So that's where Friends of Three Fingers was born. And we weren't, part of that original initiation, but we had seen those pictures and wanted to do something about it. So we're kind of just reaching out to people that we knew that might have some sort of contact for how we could get involved. And we were pointed towards this group, and that's how we got involved in it. It turns out that they were really excited to have us be part of it because we have that climbing knowledge, and that's really helpful, of course, when you've got this little lookout that's perched on basically a pedestal. You need to have a knowledge of rope management and some climbing techniques to do some of the repairs that were required. So it was really fun that it was a way to basically give back to the community, give back to a place that we have enjoyed and utilized for our own purposes, and also basically use our own skills and strengths to make it a better place for others.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. And like, it's obviously, you kind of described what it is like. You're gonna have to have some climbing skills and have hiked something. Can you kind of describe how that happened? Like how you were able to bring these big materials up there?
Yeah. And it's in a wilderness area, so you can't, unless you get it like, approved by the Forest Service, you can't just bring like a helicopter load of materials in. So actually every single thing that was brought up there was brought up on foot by people. And one thing that's really cool about the structure of how Friends of Three Fingers did it is we purchased all the materials and then we packaged it up as small as we could, or like as individual boards, or nails that were put into like a peanut butter jar so it was all contained. And all of that was placed at the trailhead with signs on them that said, if you can, please bring this up to the lookout. And all of those materials, just by people that were visiting, people that were passing through, all of those materials made it up there just by like citizen support and citizen volunteerism. So that was really cool to see that, yeah, we were able to get up hundreds of pounds of materials just by asking hikers if they could do it for us. So then all of that stuff was up there and we were able to go up and put it all together as needed and use it to create new shutters and replace some of the broken window glass and paint the outside and all the other repairs that were needed.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, it's just like such a cool community thing to put together.
Yeah. And we found too that like even after stuff had all been brought up, people were reaching out and saying like, hey, I really wanted to help with this, but there was nothing left at the trailhead. So like, is there any other way that I can help? So like, people just, it's one of those places where you go to and you just naturally feel inspired and you naturally feel like you're part of history or part of something special, just because it is such a unique place. And I think, even when you just bring up an extra jug of paint up there, having that connection to this historical building is something that's really special for people. And that really became apparent when we saw, again, hundreds of pounds of stuff that made it up there just by asking.
Yeah. It's like being active with a mission. You know, like we have to do this for the good of
Yep.
the world. No, I love that so much. You are an advocate for animals. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why that's important?
Yeah, I think going back to just how I grew up with that, that appreciation for nature and the environment, of course, animals go hand in hand with that. So I can't remember a time where I wasn't like an animal lover, animal person. I think basically everyone that knows me knows knows that I'm a big animal person. So that started at a very young age. I was always obsessed with my pets, my dog Smokey, the cats that we had. Um, that's kind of who I always gravitated to. If my parents took me and my siblings to like a dinner party, I was always like, oh, people, but oh, they have a cat. I'll go over here in this corner. So that's always been just a part of my life. I was also like definitely one of those kids that, in addition to like enjoying being outside and wanting to be in nature, I wanted to like know about all the things that I was seeing. So I was definitely one of those kids where like if we had people over, I'd be like, identifying the different plants or like pointing out the different animals that we saw and like naming what they were. Like, oh, that's a banana slug. Don't get that confused with the leopard slug. I was that kid. So I think I've always just had an interest in learning more about the natural environment or natural ecosystem around me. And I love Washington, so like learning more about the overall environment of Washington is really important, and of course that deeply connects to the animals that are here too.
Yeah. What is the difference between a banana slug?
Well, yeah, so the leopard slugs, I mean, you'll notice that they have like the really pretty like patterns, the markings on them.
Mhm.
They are like similar in size and length to a banana slug, but the banana slugs are they're the the kind of like greenish yellowy ones that you'll see around. Um, yeah, they're cute. Yeah.
No, that was one thing I noticed when I first moved to Washington is like the slugs are
The
just
slugs.
huge. Yeah, and I mean, they're cool. I love slugs, but
I
like,
know.
it's just like they're like as big as my hand.
Yep.
Okay, so you had a goal of like looking at all or hiking up to all the fire lookouts of Washington. What are your goals kind of like going maybe into next year or, what are your goals, period?
Yeah, well, that still is one of them.
Okay.
So there's 97 lookouts that we're trying to go to. Technically, on the list of like registered standing lookouts, there's 93, but there's like four additional ones that are kind of like pseudo lookouts that maybe aren't on the registered list that we're also trying to get to. But anyway, 97, and we're at just above 60 right now. So we still have a decent ways to go. So we'll be hitting a few of those this next year. But in terms of other goals, I mean, I getting out in the mountains as much as possible this coming summer. I'm planning on trying ice climbing for the first time this next year. That's something that I haven't dipped my feet into yet, but am working towards that. So just want to try it out and just add it to, my skills for climbing and things like that. Um, and then my husband and I are actually working on building a house on Lopez Island. So that's taking a lot of our time right now, but that's definitely a big goal of ours, is finishing that, or at least, getting towards finishing that, because of course it takes way longer than
Yeah.
you ever would plan.
I didn't know you were building it. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's a learning experience for sure. My husband does building for a living, so he has a lot of that knowledge base, but we are trying to build it completely off grid, which is not something he's done before. So we're learning all of that along the way, like, how many solar panels do we need? How many batteries do we need to correspond with that? How do we manage our water runoff? There's so many things that like when you just move in, like all those things are already thought of and you don't even really need to like consider it. Um, even like our toilet is like that's all of a sudden like a huge topic of conversation
Yeah.
between us and like our friends,
Mhm.
which is not something I ever really expected, but it is when you're trying to build something off grid.
Is it like a compostable toilet? Is that right? Like,
So yeah, there's kind of two options for off-grid toilets. You could either do a composting toilet, or you can go the electric route and get an incinerator toilet. So an incinerator toilet basically just like has an element that heats to a really high temperature and basically turns everything into ash, and
Mhm.
it compacts down really small, and you can add that to a compost pile or something like that. So there's pros and cons to each. Obviously, like incinerator toilet requires a lot more power. You'll need a lot more solar power or whatever you're generating power from. And then a composting toilet is generally a bit more work because you have to, churn it, you have to manage your compost system, and you have to have a whole plan for that. So there's pros and cons to either, but they're both very environmentally friendly and effective, and they work. So we're trying to figure out. We have a incinerator toilet right now, but we're also going to be making an outhouse with a compost toilet to kind of figure out in the long run like what works the best for us.
Cool. No, that's a good idea. Just test
Yeah.
both of them to see.
Yep.
How is the house? Are you gonna do like an A-frame or like what's the house gonna look like?
It's kind of I wouldn't really describe it as like a typical style. So we
Okay.
actually do want to build like a fire lookout portion of it. So, but
Mhm.
not like on stilts like how some of them are built. We'd actually have like a base that would have a room underneath and then like the fire lookout part on top.
Mhm.
Um, in addition to, like your typical garage and, rest of that. But where we're at on Lopez Island, if you're on top of the hill, you can kind of see the mountains, and we're hoping that by like raising up the level of the house, we'll have a place where we can have a little bit of a view, which would be really exciting.
Yeah.
And when in discussing that, we're like, well, of course we'll do a fire lookout because they have the best views. So that's kind of where that idea came from. So yeah. Yeah, we kind of sound like nerds. We're like, yeah, it's like looking up some fire lookout plans, trying to make it to scale. But it is interesting. Like once
Yeah.
you kind of get involved with it and you learn about like the history of it and all these different models throughout the course of the history of when fire lookouts were really heavily used, especially in Washington, it is kind of interesting and fun to see like the evolution of that and how fire management has been done throughout the years here.
Yeah, that's so cool. And it's such a cool, unique idea too. I mean, it's so meaningful to you both,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and so I think that's super special. And it'll also be cool but once you finish it, once you start going to all the other fire lookouts to kind of compare, you're like, oh, I like how they did this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I like what they did with the place.
Yeah. You are an amazing artist and you're inspired by the outdoors. How did you start doing that? And then animals or mountains, which do you prefer most?
Ooh. Um, so yeah, I've always loved doing art. I think I started, well, I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure I started mostly drawing animals, especially cats. When I was like in kindergarten, first grade, I was super into cats. And so
Mhm.
like I draw all my like rainbow kitties, because I was also inspired by Lisa Frank, as many people of my generation were. Um, so I had all of my own personal Lisa Frank kitties.
Mhm.
So that's probably where a lot of my art started. Um, but since then, again, it's been a lot of inspiration from the outdoors things that I see. I really like, I love being able to look at a landscape or an animal or a certain place and being able to capture that and put it on paper is, something I'm really grateful to have the skill to do. And it certainly has been like, a way for me to de-stress and just kind of focus on one task that like doesn't have any like outside influences other than what I'm actually looking at. Um, and it like in terms of mountains or animals, which one do I prefer? I think it depends. Like I go through seasons with my art. And I also like do some style changes as many people who do art do. But sometimes I'll just be like heavily focused, like mountains are all I do. That's all I draw. And I'll do that for like a year. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm tired of that. And then all I'll do is draw animals and then it'll flip flop. It's kind of always been that way. It's hard for me to just like focus on one sort of topic or subject for a really long extended amount of time.
Yeah. I didn't include this in the questions, but I did want to ask you a little bit about your work. I
Oh
know you
yeah.
work on a farm. Is that right?
Yeah. So I work for an organization called Pasado Safe Haven, and it's an animal sanctuary located in Monroe, Washington. So, basically in our backyard, and they rescue companion animals, so cats and dogs, and farmed animals. So we've got pigs, chickens, goats, sheep, ducks, cows, all different types of farm animals. And all of the animals that are there have been rescued from either abuse, neglect, or abandonment. And what I do there is I manage their education programs, and I also am involved in their advocacy and policy work. So I do a lot of just overall program management and design for the education side of things. So figuring out how to design curriculum for classrooms who might be coming out on field trips to the sanctuary, or planning community events out there that are related to helping animals and learning about animals. Um, I work with a team to, of course, provide tours of the sanctuary and things like that. And then on the policy side of things, it's basically figuring out like what are some of the loopholes or some of the shortcomings that we have specifically in Washington with our laws in terms of protecting animals, and figuring out ways that we can adjust the laws, amend them, or add new ones that will make our communities safer for the animals that we're serving. So it's kind of, a broad a broad range of skills, which I mean, it does make it fun because every day is something a little bit different, and different weeks I might be focusing completely on policy work because it might be the middle of the legislative session, but then in the summer I'll be like completely focused on doing things for kids because we're running our summer camps. So there's definitely like a really broad range of stuff. And of course it's all related to helping animals, which of course is something that's important to me. So it's one of those jobs where um, it's easy to get really like sucked into it because it's something that's really important to me and something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. And because like when you were in the Peace Corps, it was pretty much all consuming. I'm sure you're kind of like,
Yep.
unfortunately, kind of doing the same thing, in that role.
Yeah. Yeah. That's life of a nonprofit
Yeah.
worker, really. Like, if you're in nonprofits, it's like that just automatically attracts people that are interested in a certain cause, whether that is helping people or whether that's becoming a social worker or working directly with kids, working with animals. It just automatically draws people that are passionate about those things, and good and bad, because of course like that does get people that want to do so much, and that could eventually lead to burnout if they aren't careful with that work-life balance. But then it also can provide such a sense of accomplishment too when you're doing something that you're really passionate about.
We always like to end our interviews with asking for words of empowerment for women who might want to like try something new or are maybe intimidated.
Hmm.
So what would your words of empowerment be?
I would say that, and this goes for myself as well, but just don't compare yourself to others. And, especially with today's like heavy focus on social media, it's so easy to do. It's so easy to look at someone's social media feed or a fitness influencer and just think that like what they have or what they're doing is so unobtainable because they're doing so much. But, it's they're only really sharing a fraction of what they're actually doing or what their life looks like. And so just try whatever you want to do. And for me too, it also is all about surrounding yourself with the right people, encouraging people, and even if whatever you're trying doesn't go as well, if you're with the right people, it still is going to be fun and it still will be a good experience no matter what the actual outcome is physically. So, yeah, just don't compare and surround yourself with good people.
Do you have anything that you wanted to discuss that I didn't touch on?
I would definitely, give a healthy plug to Friends of Three Fingers. They don't have a website or anything, but they do have a Facebook page. And on that Facebook page, they've got, all the information about getting involved if somebody wants to volunteer or even donate. So definitely a good plug to them.
Yes. And then if anybody wants to check out your artwork, where could they see that?
Oh, so I do have an Etsy page. It's currently not like up and running, but it still is like there, so you can see everything.
Mhm.
Um, but the Etsy page is the title is Roaming with Rowan. So that's roaming with, and then Rowan, my dog's name, so it's Rowan.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. You certainly did not have to, and I do appreciate it. I really think you're so like it just seems such an easy thing for you to live that lifestyle, and I really wanted to share that with other people, just that active lifestyle, like ingraining it in what you just do on a normal daily basis without I mean, I know there's some effort involved with planning and things, but like you've kind of just made it a priority for yourself. And I think that's truly important. And I wanted to share that. So I appreciate you sharing your story with everyone. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, I hope that for someone at least
Yeah.
it is helpful and provide some inspiration if that's even possible. I don't know. But yeah, I definitely want to see other people enjoying the outdoors as much as I do and feeling comfortable out there.
You can follow me personally. That's at Jacalyn Gross, JACALYNGROSS. I mostly take pictures of banana slugs. You can follow UR Sportswear. That's the letter U, the letter R Sportswear on all social platforms. You can check out any of our products at ursportswear.com. And if you're listening to this podcast and want to check out our videos, you can check out the UR Sportswear's YouTube channel. This video and audio recording was produced by Jeremy Canaria and edited by me. Thank you so much for listening.